Yep, now recording.
Okay.
Thank you.
Um, okay, so I'll start with a quick introduction of myself. I'm Peter Olszowka. I've done a lot of Spanish tech. I've been a tech director of Aresia and Boscone. Last Worldcon thing I did was Lone Star Con. I directed the Masquerade and ran Switcher for the Hugo Awards. So I have a fair amount of experience in this stuff, but not as much as the people who've been pros, like Sid. Let's see. So the plan for most of this is to have the multi-view as my camera. No, right. That's right. The panel is my camera, and the multi-view is the share. From second camera. Now let's see. That's the one I want. Okay.
So we got the control panel as your share right now.
Right, which is what I want. So you should see so the share should be the software control panel,
Right.
and my camera should be the hardware control panel.
Tis.
And that's the view I'm going to show most of the time.
Let me pin that. There we go.
Yeah.
Spotlight yourself.
Oh, right. I'm going to. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Which should be under here. Yes. Okay. Okay. So let me talk. I'm going to try to, like 20 minutes, try to go through real quickly the basics of this thing and spend the rest of the time on the sort of advanced topics. That was the real thing I want to focus on. So in terms of video, the Extreme has 8 HDMI inputs, and so you see them here as those 8 buttons, and they're cam 1 through 8 on the software. So my cursor show up, yeah, on the software. And on the software, the names of those buttons is configurable. And then there's a bunch of, I'll call them virtual inputs. You have black, there's 2 color generators. There's 2 media players. Let's see. Oh, I want to share the multi-view. I want to share the multi-view most of the time. That is here. No, that is here. That's a more useful thing to share. Okay. So the Extreme has this multi-view, and you get to pick. You can configure it however you want, and unfortunately, with if we're actually using all the features, you'd kind of be screwed because there isn't really enough screen real estate, and then you definitely want a second monitor for some of this stuff. And, okay. So we can do the media player has a bunch of stills that you can view. This panel here is where you can configure them. The second tab at the bottom, and that's you actually can go into your file system and load them up. There's room for 20 stills. And you can also do a capture to generate them that way. And then when you're in switcher mode, this media player tab up here, you get to pick which still is coming out of which player. If I click this, and you notice on the multi-view that it changes in that lower left box there with the multi-view inputs. Let's see, and then there's 2 more inputs. If you hit Shift on the keyboard, on the computer keyboard, you get a bars button magically appears, and you can bring up bars. I'll just preview bars just to show that off. And you let go to Shift, and it disappears. Don't know why they hit it there, but they did. And then lastly is the super source. I've got the super source in a box on the multi-view right now. That is a pretty strange beast. It's up to 4 images, up to 4 live images, sort of reduced however you want into boxes, and then on top of a graphic background, and it feeds ahead of the regular bus. So it's nowhere near a full second second bus, like a 2ME switcher, but it's an awful lot of functionality ahead of the 1ME bus. So if you like 1.5 ME or 1.25 ME or something like that. Okay, switcher capabilities are sort of measured in how many mix effects buses they have. All the ATEM Pros have one, and it's just it's a set of inputs and transitions connecting those inputs together. And so on the bigger switchers, you'll have a whole second set of program and preview, or really sort of output and preview, and keyers and switchers, transitions that can then feed into either an aux output or into another bus. Okay, let's see. And then for audio inputs, it can take an audio input out of every camera input, and then there's 2 auxiliary inputs that are labeled as mic, but they can accept line input. And I'm just going to give a quick shot of the mixer here, so you can see there's this virtual digital mixer inside here. So it's got the 8 cameras and the 2. They call them microphones, but I said they're really aux inputs. And the whole thing is stereo. It has an equalizer, dynamics, audio follow video mode if you want, and you can monitor it with headphones. The Extreme has a headphone jack and a level control on that, which is extremely well. The smaller switchers don't have that headphone jack, though they pretty much have the same mixer lined up for the number of inputs they have. More on the audio later.
Peter, can we make sure
Yes?
that whoever is not you has their microphone muted, because there's a lot of noise in the background? Everybody, please mute their microphones.
Okay, the only one I see open is recent. See if I can just mute that. It seems like I can't. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, that's weird. It doesn't take. Okay, Lisa, is there anything you can do with that? Oh, okay, you're muted now. Okay. For outputs, the program out gets routed to the simulated webcam or the recording. This has the Extreme has 2 USB-Cs, and you can either put in flash drives and record on them, or hook up plug it into a computer, and it'll emulate a webcam. And both of those features only ever record program or output program. There's 2 other outputs that are just labeled the HDMI 1 and 2, and you get a wide variety of what those can output. And in fact, on the control panel itself, you've got buttons that let you set what HDMI 1 is. I'm currently showing multi-view. HDMI 1 is what my camera is, so it's currently on multi-view, but I can make it just show the switcher. I can make it just show me. Let's see, preview and program. So that can be done with hot swapping. On the software control, you have all that control as well, including some more options. Let's see, so I can show you bars, wow. And you also have control over the second output, so the same number of options. The second output's not currently wired to anything in this setup. But those two outputs give you a great deal of flexibility. Generally when I'm doing shows, I'm only streaming from the webcam. I'm not making use of the HDMI outputs for that purpose. So I have one of them set up as my multi-view for controlling what I'm doing, and then the way I've used the second one most often is I hook it up to a projector or a large display, and if there's slides or some other content, I can show that to the audience, and then I'll set things up where the audience will see the slides full screen on the projector or the display, but the online audience will see that content in a box on the screen alongside the video of what's taking place. And later on, I'll demonstrate setting up that box. But that's definitely a use of the second output. Something else we've talked about recently is hooking up a test equipment on that second output, waveform monitor, vector scope. And because right on the front panel, you can just jump through the cameras. I hit some button here. That could be very handy for hooking up test equipment to adjust exposure, color balance, whatever the cameras, to the extent that you can adjust them on the cameras. Okay, so for controlling this, I've, as I said, there's I've been doing things on the front panel. You can see the front panel here, and it's definitely only gives you access to, I don't know, 10% of the functionality or something. Though if you've set things up with the software, then you can use the front panel to call it up. And unfortunately, a huge amount of the front panel is reserved for camera control if you have this hooked up to Blackmagic cameras. But a Blackmagic camera costs something like 3 times the price of this switcher, so it's kind of a different scale of investment. I'm kind of surprised that they imagined that somebody who would be buying a $1,000 switcher would be buying 3 or 4 $3,500 cameras. So I don't know if they were thinking of that, especially to use up so much of these real estate for that. This section down here is for audio, and I could imagine that being a little more practical. But again, I never use the microphones on the cameras. I generally have microphones on the performers and a second person doing a mix, and bring just one line audio in to stream. And so this ends up being a lot more wasted real estate on the front panel. So in addition to that, there's software control that Blackmagic provides that has access to everything, though not necessarily the most convenient UI. And you can connect your computer either by USB or Ethernet to the switcher for it to connect and have this software work. And in fact, this software talks to the switcher over a public protocol. So there's third-party software that can also operate the switcher that can give you a much better UI. I have a product called Mix Effect that's on my iPad, but I have a lot of trouble getting the iPad connected to the switcher because the iPad only talks Wi-Fi, and so then I have to put the switcher on the Wi-Fi, and the switcher doesn't itself have Wi-Fi, so that gets more complicated setting that up. And I did not manage to get that set up today, so I don't have the iPad connected. One thing that's really important about the Ethernet thing is that multiple devices can be connected simultaneously. So if you were doing a big show with a lot of graphics, such as an award show, you could have a second person on a second computer in this screen playing around with all the slides. Because maybe 20 slides is not enough to do your whole show, and so they could be constantly uploading new ones. Maybe they jump in here and change which ones were live, and that that could be an efficient way to run things. Because certainly it would just be crazy busy to do something like, an award show with a lot of graphics and have one person trying to go back and forth between, uploading new slides and then following the action and taking the shots and calling the shots and whatever. That's too much for one person to do. And if you were using the audio from the cameras and actually making use of that mixer, you could even have a third person doing the mixing on yet another computer. There's another set of controls that Fred's been playing with, Fred Bauer, that I haven't tried myself. And there's a gadget out there called a Stream Deck, which is basically a panel full of configurable buttons that are high quality buttons, and the display on the buttons can be changed under software control. The thing I find annoying about the Stream Deck is that the Stream Deck itself doesn't know how to talk to the ATEMs, and so then you have to get a second device, so it could be a Pi, running this software called Companion that actually does a translation between the Stream Deck button pushes and particular commands on the ATEM protocol. And that just seems sort of complicated and fussy to me, so I haven't bothered playing with that. But maybe at some point I'll get around to it. Similarly, you can buy from Blackmagic a real control surface. Again, the control surfaces are a few $1,000s, so they're really intended for the higher end switchers. It works. Their basic control protocol is the same on all their switchers, and the difference is just how many inputs can be addressed. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's see. So do some basic features. Let's see. So for this section here, I'm going to keep the display in multi-view, but you can look at the program output in the upper right and see what I'm doing. And so for simple things on the selection, you can just hit a button on the program bus and change what the output is. And that's the most straightforward way of changing things. You can get a similar quick cut if you have a different thing selected on the preview bus. You can hit the cut button here in software or on the panel, and it just swaps between the preview and the program selection. If you there's two ways to configure the operation of the front panel, and I have this in program preview mode. So if you select one of the inputs, I'll select one of the multiplayer. It turns it green and brings it up on the preview, but doesn't do anything on program, and you can just go back and preview different things. As I said, I don't have that many different inputs to show, but I have a few. And then after you've brought into preview, you can then do cut and do the transition. The other mode, you set the transition first, and hitting the button goes straight to that input, which means that there's no way to preview from the front panel in the other mode, but you can still do it on in the software. Okay, let's go. Let's see. So okay, that's where I was before. Okay, so that's simple setting things on the mix effect bus. There's a bunch of different transitions. I was doing cuts. It has this huge collection of transitions, and I've been reading some articles about why switchers have all these transitions when people hardly ever use them. And I think part of the explanation is that when they first started, it was like that was the only interesting stuff they could do, and then every time someone built a new switcher, they didn't want to drop any of the old features of a previous switcher or a competing switcher, even if no one ever used it. And so the combinations just always grew. So hitting auto implements the selected transition, or you can do it on this virtual T-bar. The only other one I ever really use, because I do a lot of concerts, so I tend to use this mix, which is also known as crossfade or dissolve. And what that looks really weird with the flip-three buttons. But that's a dissolve between two inputs. But I'll just do dip, goes to a color before it dissolves, and then you got to pick the color. And it comes out of the color generator. So I have it, it's going to dip to gray on the way into the other thing. And then you can do crazy stuff is that instead of a solid color, you can dip to anything you want. So I can transition to bars on the way through, which is, bars is pretty silly, but one could imagine transitioning through a logo might possibly make sense.
It's like your backdrop's a stinger.
Yeah, a real cheap stinger. Let's see. Actually, those are broken. We can't shut them. Let's see. How bad is Zach's crying coming through the audio?
We can hear it, but we can hear you. It's hard to hear Hobbit with he's saying.
Say again?
We can hear him, but it's okay. We can still hear you.
Okay.
It's hard to hear what Hobbit says. He's far enough away, too.
Okay.
I got a real microphone on this.
But it's 3 times closer to me than you. Okay. I'm not going to do all the transitions, but just do one more. We'll do wipes. We've got all kinds of shapes. So a wipe is where there's a moving line between the transition, and you get all kinds of little tweaks to that moving line, like how soft it is, what the width is, if it's got any width, and what's in between. So like I'll make a bright green line. Let's see what that guy looks like. Yeah, bright green line going across. Anyway, but you just get a gazillion little options. Oh, this flip-flop one is kind of cute where it goes back and forth automatically. Anyway, but again, those tend not to be used very much. I heard an explanation where someone said, well, this wipe, let's get rid of the border here. That if you need to do some sort of split screen, you can move your T-bar halfway and you get a split screen. But it turns out that there's all these ways to just do that straight with keys. So you don't have to have it quite so fussy as playing with the T-bar and getting it exactly where you wanted it, assuming that you can set it up in advance and know exactly how you want to split things. Okay, so I'm gonna stop doing transitions. Okay, so here.
Keys at a whole other level of influence.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do a little bit of the upstream keys. Okay. So.
Screen versus downstream.
So upstream keys are basically upstream of the main transition. So I'm going to set up a key. Now, so this control here specifies what's going to happen in the next transition. So when I add the key to the transition, in the preview, you now see the black box because the key's not set up to do anything useful, but the transition will bring in that key. So let's just make it put inbox. And this key that I have right here is just, it's shrinking. And so it's shrinking the image to put it in that box. But the thing that's going to happen is if I do a transition, let me go back to simple wipe because those will be easier things to see. If you have a transition set up, in fact, we'll bring in our ugly border. And it was reasonably slow. So the transition brings in the key as well as background is lit, so that means it's also going to change the base image. So the wipe brought in the new image and the key. If I take the key out of the transition, this transition control, then the wipe is only going to change the underlying image and it's not going to affect the key. And then similarly, I can have it affect the key and not the background. So now the wipe will take the key out and leave the background where it was. And that whole effect can work with any of the transitions that I was showing earlier. So this upstream is, these four keys are all upstream of the transition.
The on-air means it's just in effect at any given time.
Right. So in addition to bringing it in through the transition, right, you can just hit the button and bring it on whenever you want. And some of those are even accessible on the front panel. So you notice that this light just came on. So this control right here it's labeled picture-in-picture, but picture-in-picture is implemented as a DVE key on key number 1. So on and off, right on the front panel, is bringing in that DVE key on key number 1. There's a bunch of shortcuts on key number 1 on the front panel. This one here that's labeled key number 1 is actually chroma key on key number 1. So you see these 4 tabs under the upstream key number 1 control. Only one of those can be used at any one time. So if I hit this button here, it's asking for chroma key while the DVE key is turned on, and it's going to complain and not do it. But if I take out the DVE key, I can now bring in the chroma key, except the chroma key is not configured to do anything useful, and so we just get black. So I'll take out the chroma key. Those are the only 2 keys that you can call for on the front panel, the upstream keys, but you can control the input. So DVE1, so this whole set of controls up here is controlling what gets fed to all these various types of keys. So on DVE1 in the software, I've currently got color bars configured here. I can change it to camera 1, and you can see that on the panel it just changed to camera 1. So camera 1 is routed to DVE1, and I could change that to camera 2, and now it says camera 2 in the software. So that's what I'm changing, what that DVE is going to bring in. The preview is showing you what I've selected. And if I call for it, it goes red on this bus selection to help, warn you that that's actually live. So now, because this is red, I know, if I make this change, now that it's red, I'm going to be changing it live. Let's see. Okay, so downstream keys, and I'm done with the basic functions. I think that's all I want to cover on upstream keys in my quick overview section. So downstream keys, let's get all this stuff out of here. Okay. Okay, that's a good spot to be in. Okay, so the downstream keys are downstream of the transition. So however you set up the transition will not affect the downstream key. And they're also a lot simpler. There's only a luma key, but you can have the luma either be set to the luminance of the image, or if you've uploaded an image file, then it has to be a PNG with an alpha channel, then you can key on the alpha channel. And let's see. And that's actually a detailed thing that I wanted to go into now. So I'm gonna focus on downstream keys because they can do a lot of things that would actually be particularly relevant for conventions, because I can imagine there'd be a lot of use for some graphics, some basic graphics. So, so one of the ones that I'm a fan of is bugs. So a little tiny logo that goes in the corner of the screen that stays up the whole time. So you can see in the media player 2 on the multi-view, I've got a logo keyed up. And so if I bring that on air, and we get that little logo on the screen, and just sits there. It's one advantages of making it downstream, especially on downstream key 2. So that's like, the very last piece of control before the program out. So the bug is always there, and no matter what you're doing, it's not going to affect the bug. So I can do, I've got a wipe set up, so I can do a wipe, and the bug just stays there, it doesn't care. I can bring in the upstream keys, the bug doesn't care. Because as I said, it's one of the last effects, so it's just, that image is piled on top of whatever you ever have upstream. The thing that is a concern is that it's taking up media player 2. And on the preview, media player 2 is in red because it's live right now. So that's not available to use in for some other key, or all kinds of other things you might want to be doing with your media players.
Where the transition is, right? The tie thing?
Yeah, so the if you hit the tie button, then it means that next time you do a transition, it's going to trigger this auto. The auto just fades the key in and out at however many time you have here, so over 25 frames. So I'm do the time. I'm just going to demonstrate the auto. The auto just fades it in and out. That's the only transition that happens on the key. So if I tie it, and I've got my fancy wipe, you'll notice that the downstream key doesn't wipe, it fades while the wipe is happening. And fades back in when I go back the other way. The other thing that's useful, okay, if the key isn't on air and you hit tie, you see it on the preview, and I keep pointing at it, and it just puts my hand on the camera here, which isn't useful. And that can be very helpful because if you're bringing up a graphic and you haven't set it just right, you need to tune it before you try to bring it in. And these parameters here are kind of fussy. So right now it's set right to that thing, but if I can adjust them wrong, the things gets a little fuzzy. And in fact, I can set this so wrong that it doesn't key right at all. Okay, so there it's fading the whole image. There's a way that I can set this. Yeah, and I can have the key so far off that it's ruining the main picture. So before you bring a key live, you need to make sure that it's set right to not ruin the main picture and to look just about right.
In the ruined mode, we took off tie, we get the preview clean up again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. So the rules over here, right? So I undo the tie. Now it's not previewing the key, and so it looks fine. But if I brought this thing on air now, it's going to ruin the picture. And this isn't, at least there's still a picture. You can completely lose it entirely depending on how you've got things set and what the graphic looks like. Okay, so this guy was over here. So this one. Okay, so that looks about right for that. And let's say I don't want to do on the transition, but now I can safely bring it in and it doesn't hurt the picture. Now, the other interesting thing is that we're keying on the alpha channel from that image, and we're filling it with the image itself. And if you look at the image on the multi-view, you can see that it's just a white on black. But I can actually fill it with something else. So like I could fill it with that horrible green. And now if I bring it on, let's preview it. Let's see. We see the horrible green. And so in fact, we go to the palettes, we can pick any color we want, and oh, that's weird. Okay, apparently, oh, it brought up another little window here. Fine. Let's see, if I put this window over here, actually, yeah, that's right. You guys should see this. Okay, so it brought up a little window that lets me put. Oh, I can pick an existing color. Oh, that's pretty. And now we're filling in with the blue, and then you can fill in. Well, for that matter, you can fill in with an image. It won't look very good on the on this particular key, but you get a tiny bit. No. So you're seeing this tiny little bit of my image. There we go. My hand going through the key. Again, not useful for that particular thing, but it could be useful for something.
So the key source is your alpha mask.
Right.
From a file. And the fill is what goes in the key, and that comes from the thing.
Right. So now I have a key that is intended to do some of these effects. Okay, and it was this guy. Okay, so you can't see that there's anything special there. You just see this text white on black. But it turns out that I've got some interesting stuff going on in the alpha channel to try to make that text visible on a light screen. So now if I bring, but I got to set it right. Okay. Because I got a weird fill. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this key configuration. Need letter key, letter 2. And that's we're seeing it on a dark screen, so it's not so hard. So I'm going to make the background a light color. And I've got to set my things just right here. There we go. Okay, so there's this little bit of gray cloud in the image, because you don't see on the black.
Partial alpha?
It's partial alpha. So now, when I bring this guy on air, on the dark background, you barely see it, but on the light background, it stands out to make the text more readable on the light background. So that's the kind of trick that you can do with the alpha channel that you can't do any other way. Now I find that, well, for one thing, creating this image was a huge pain in the ass, because what I was trying to do is make a soft edge to that gray cloud. And as you can see, it doesn't seem as soft. Like I personally would want it more soft than that. And I was, and the other problem I was having is that a lot of the tools that I was using to create slides, like Keynote and Google Slides and whatever, could not put a soft edge on a rectangle.
I've done that in GIMP any number of times.
GIMP is just such a pain in the ass to use. And then PowerPoint could put a soft edge, but PowerPoint doesn't do a slide with a transparent background, so you have to export the slide without its background, which is possible, and that's actually what I did, but it's a pain. There's also the issue that PowerPoint's expensive, and I did it on my work computer, but the company has switched away from Microsoft, and at the end of the year, our license for PowerPoint goes away. So, and I don't think I'm going to buy a PowerPoint my own, but it's at some point an awesome tool.
Put that file up somewhere and I'll be happy to contribute.
Well, but in what format? Like, do you just want the bits, or do you want, something that actually has the text and the vectors?
If it's PNG, I'll take it and fix it.
Okay, but that's just bits, so that'll be even harder to work with. Okay, so back to okay, let's put me back on the screen. Let's see. So when something's coming out of the media player, this media player 2 key means the alpha channel, and if you just key on the image, you're going to key on the luma, which works. It just means you don't get the shadow at all. And let's just go back to that.
So it's combining the alpha and the color together. Right? So that's the alpha, that's the color.
No. This means that the source, key source, is the image itself, not its alpha. The source is the image, and so making the source of the image means the luminance of the image is what you're going to key on. So it's like you had an image without an alpha channel, and we're going to use it as the fill. So we're getting, as you see on the screen, we're just getting white, but there's no shadow in it. I can demonstrate the shadow by making the. Okay, now it does some other weird crap. If we tweak it, okay. I don't know where this outline comes from. If I set this right, the outline goes away. There we go. So that's kind of keying as it's intended, or it's just white on black. I think there's no way for me to set this and make the shadow show up, because the shadow's in the alpha and we're not using the alpha. Like I said, I can ruin things by messing up with my original signal. And I don't know. Maybe it's got some automatic edge detector. I have no idea where that black is coming from. But if I set the clip right, it doesn't show it. Again, it looks just fine on a dark background, and the shadow is only really relevant for making it visible on a light background. Okay. So debug. Okay. Let's do. I talked about luma versus alpha. Lower third. Okay. So I've got another image here. That's a lower third. Okay. So as you can, well, it's kind of. I'll preview it to make it a little easier to see. Down here. Okay, so this image, again from the media player, has a blue stripe, the white text, and otherwise it's all black. And I actually have no idea what's in the alpha channel. We could find out by keying it. And we're currently, because we're doing the luma. Key. So again, we're keying on the image itself. So it's keying on the luma, and the threshold is set so only the white pokes through. And if I move the threshold, I can get the blue to poke through. I should be able to get the blue to poke. Oh, maybe maybe I can't without the alpha channel. Looks like I can't get the blue to show through without the alpha channel. So if I turn on the alpha channel. Oh, no problem. So this does have an alpha channel. Okay, so that's another advantage of having an alpha channel. You would absolutely have to have an alpha channel image if you wanted to put a black stripe with white text, because there'd be no place you could set the luma key would make that look how you wanted. One thing I mentioned: this pre-multiplied key thing is some particular way of setting up the alpha and the luma channels that a Photoshop plugin will do. And if you use the Photoshop Blackmagic plugin, it will So, one cute feature it has is Photoshop can upload directly to the Blackmagic media player right from the plugin. And then the other thing it'll do is it'll set up your keys to look exactly the same on the Blackmagic as they do in Photoshop, which is a useful feature, but Photoshop is way too expensive. I think it's $25 a month, or $30 a month, whatever. So I have not considered using that, but if it's for your job every day, it would be certainly easily worth it. But if I have, let's see, I've got other slides with the same color scheme, so I don't need to tweak the adjustments, and it comes through just fine. So if you have a bunch of different graphics with the exact same color scheme generated with the same software, you can reliably just switch from one to the next and not have to adjust things. But anytime you're bringing up a slide that you haven't brought up before, you really need to preview it and make sure that those settings in the clip and gain get you how you want your lower third to look. Okay.
You built a consistent set. If you
Right.
have a bunch of lower thirds that all look the same.
Well, I mean, for your lower third, you're probably going to do that, but you know, your bug versus your lower third, maybe some other graphic. Like if you have some beginning and ending title slide. So I have, let's take this off the air. Right, so this guy was intended as a title slide, and the idea was, oh, maybe some of the, a little bit of the background scene could shine through it. Actually, this one won't do that very well because of the black in the image. Yeah, so if I wanted to use this as a okay, something more up. Okay, so let's see here. So we're going to make, if you need with the thing. Okay, that's not so bad. So that just drops the title slide and lets the background show through on the edges. And so you could imagine that for some sort of entrance slide. So I guess the alpha on this thing must just be that rectangle that is filled out. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover on downstream cues. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show was the order of these. The downstream key number 2 is on top of number 1, if you are using both at the same time. Yes. 4's on top of 3, is on top of 2, is on top of 1. Yeah, the layers
Coming at you, yeah.
layers coming at you. I don't know if I have a good way to demonstrate that, because I don't have 2 things on top. Oh, I know. Okay, I can put the Boston Synagogue on 1. I can put the bug on 2. Bring them both on there. And now, I didn't make 2 different ones. Wait a minute, try this again. All this out. Okay. I want new player. No, but 2 different. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh wait, I want this to be the other bug. Yeah. Okay. And then, actually, if I reverse them, I'm gonna make you the violin. You the that, and then I'm going to set up this key to do the right thing, and I should be able to get the shadow on top of the violin. Okay, you can kind of sort of see it. that shadow is going on top of the violin, but then something in the layers. Not the
So
mo-
the text is key too.
yeah. So the text is key too. The violin, the violin Lenny logo. It's supposed to be half of the violin and half of the Lenny. Is key one, and so that shows the layer of the keys. Okay, so I've been going for almost an hour, so I think we should do a 5-minute bio break, and then I can talk more about upstream keys and supersource. Okay, so we convene at 5:08.
Okay, the question in the meantime, could you, is it a C or a B?
That's a lightning.
Oh, do they have anything like an OTG cable for lightning?
OTG?
Where it basically creates a female USB off your existing port. I have one for the phone. So basically a female USB, like a power supply. I can plug in my phone and then I can put a stick in there and the phone sees it.
Yes, they have that.
So could you have that to control the switcher instead of messing with Ethernet?
I don't think. Oh, the particular software that I have for the iPad doesn't know how to talk to USB. It only knows how to talk over Ethernet.
Okay.
In theory, somebody ought to be able to implement that. The other thing is, I don't know if Blackmagic has published the USB interface. They've published the Ethernet interface.
What problem we have now, the two USB-Cs in the switcher are too close together, so we couldn't have the webcam cable and a stick in next to it.
So I don't understand what your cables. All of my USB cables are this size. They fit there just fine.
Well, we had a stick. We had
Sticks come this size now too.
okay, ours was fatter.
Okay.
And I offered to like crack the case off it so that it would just be the electronics
Right.
in there, and Ira blew a fit at me. You didn't want me to do that.
Right. But
So he told Lisa to go out and buy an adapter.
But nowadays, if you say I want a USB-C flash drive, it's the size of that. It fits right in there. That's how
These are actually duals. So you slide it one way, it was a USB-A. Slide it the other way, it was a C. You can stick it in either way.
Oh, at either end. Oh, so it's a
Yeah.
little wider. Yeah, but
That was the problem. So but we had an adapter which was basically a USB-C OTG cable that presented a female USB on the other end.
somebody probably has a 2-inch USB-C to USB-C female.
It was like this long.
But it was USB-C at the other end or USB-A?
A.
But you can probably get one that's USB-C just for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I haven't had trouble with that. All my USB-C cables are that small. The USB-C memories I use are that size.
Mm.
You know, that's just. I actually wonder if when they're speccing out a connector, if they spec how much space you're supposed to leave around it, and and things. Of course, I wish they would do that for AC cables and wall warts.
Some novelty USB sticks have big fat cases because it's like a toy or something, right?
Oh, well, if it's a novelty, sure. And let's see, I said 5:08, so we've got 2 more minutes.
There was something happening on that Discord about constructing stingers from some kind of like little sequential bunch of frames or some magic you could do in the ATEM that made it really easy to design stingers. I forget how they like switch them in and out.
I don't think this switch supports that. I think the higher ones do, because the higher ones.
Bio break.
It wasn't that I needed a bio break. I just figured that after an hour I should allow one for whoever else is on the call.
We just
And
figured you wouldn't start until everyone got back. That's all.
Right. Well, we're kind of talking about stuff that wasn't really in the curriculum.
How's it going?
you know, just spitballing about connector types and you know, stuff we ran into with NEFA, this, that, and the other. Not relevant.
I've got a quick tutorial for you today.
You should have had a camera on Hobbit.
Pardon?
You should have had a camera on Hobbit. Like
Yeah,
camera.
well, or he could just kind of move his chair over and get in front of the camera.
No, I mean just a different camera, like camera 3.
Oh, yeah. Look, you should see this setup. It took me 2 hours to hook up what I did hook up. I didn't want to hook up even more cameras.
It worked in the past, right? You used to be able to go
If I
right
could
into
reach that with a cable
Photoshop,
from this, I could just
file, and then export,
shoot the whole thing.
and then you could directly put it straight into
Um,
the ATEM media pool.
And what should I put you in? I guess you could go in camera 3 here.
Yeah.
Although one of the things I don't have any HDMI barrel connectors, so you're stuck at that length.
Yeah, that's fine. You got one of the minis to.
That's in the box.
Oh, okay. Well, I could probably just stand over here and still shoot it. That's probably gonna work.
Well, I'm not sure if you can actually see the whole thing.
It's worth a try because it is quite an impressive array of stuff. But it's only mission control.
Okay, we'll go into camera 3 here.
Know how to hook these up. I'll go ahead and do it.
Via the export plugin. Right now I'm in Photoshop, the export plugin, the media pool, via the ATEM
Nope.
media pool.
You were a second ago. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's just your hand is in front of the camera.
Putting it
Yeah.
straight
The
into
lens cap is in effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be all the way out. Oh.
And
Wow, that looks even more
I
blinky.
had it some kind of weird logo. The menus on this thing are just awful.
Just good auto.
Yeah, the menus don't roll around when you're scrolling them, and you just, yeah, the navigation is anyway, yeah. So, yes, he's got 3 switchers here.
Probably needs to talk up. Just talk a little louder. They might pick you
So,
up.
so there's 3 switchers on the table, and the laptop in the middle, and 2 giant monitors. And now I am coming in on camera 3 just so you can see that. So and you got some kind of crazy HDMI splitter in the works too, right?
Yeah, that's just so the other switcher can, instead of showing the software control panel, can show the hardware one.
Yeah, but that's all coming off the Mac, right? The software is running on the Mac itself.
The software's running on the Mac, but there's the one of the switchers is actually the extended display on the Mac.
Okay, and here's the official diagram just to get it into the video. I guess is a reasonable way to lay it out. And now that will be really recorded.
Okay. Anyways, okay,
And you can
we're
find all the manual controls on this thing, just something to navigate the damn thing.
okay. So back to the agenda. So upstream tiers. So there's a bunch of different things that they can do, but I think the most useful are insets, which is what I was doing a little bit before. So that if somebody's presenting, okay, so I'm going to say I'm presenting, and I'm going to pretend that this thing is my presentation. Oops, but I don't want it in this again. Take out the keys out. Okay. So media player 1, like you basically, instead if you had the laptop coming in on another camera, and that was a presentation, and you want to be able to show, well, I suppose a common one is you want to show the presentation full screen. So we'll bring up the presentation full screen. And then you want the person speaking to come in, and then let's see, I'm on there. On top of the presentation, of course, that's kind of big, but you could tweak it a little bit here. It's an upstream key, and so we'll make it smaller. Okay, so this interface is what really sucks. And
So that's just a key, it's not even supersource, right?
yeah, this is just one key. And well, there's in fact, there's presets built in for picture-in-picture. Preset gives you that, usable, but or you can start tweaking it a little bit off that. But if if I want to get that number to 6.5, then I have to like triple click, and it was negative 6.5, wasn't it? Negative 6.5. This is a place where the software on the iPad is just so much nicer, and you kind of just drag your finger around the iPad, and it changes that number. Well, that's the other thing is if I'm typing here, whatever, that number doesn't change live. I guess the button changes it.
Cursors and then scroll up and down, is that it? Or is that just shifting up and down?
Yeah, it doesn't do it. So there's definitely a lot of room for that UI to be better. In fact, that's a good place for macros, and I happen to have configured a bunch of macros that do these full quarter screen insets. By the way, by hitting that macro, I just lost what I just said a couple seconds ago. But
1 through 6?
yeah, you get 1 through 6 on the front panel. You get however many you want over here. But this is kind of a lot of clicking to get to macros over here. So it's not that convenient. Again, the iPad software, you can call them iPads and just get a screen full of my macro buttons. Yeah. I suppose another thing that seems likely is you want to make room for the whole presentation and the presenter. And that's a good use. Well, you can do that with 2 keys, but that's a good use for SuperSource. So let's get into SuperSource. So let's preview it. And then let's see, so I'm going to make box on me, box 2. That's an extension. Okay, I'm going to make the background. Oh, is this black? Background black. But I'm. SuperSource is previewed. I'm confused why I'm seeing 3 different things. That is black. That's just background. You can make the background all kinds of stuff. What I'm seeing. Oh yeah, that's on. That's what's confusing me. Okay, there we go. So now, okay. So I'm going to make me small. position, and I can move myself over. Oh, that's right. I can crop myself to. Oh, this is an email share. Not too much. Wait, I think that's 24. What's it going? This would have usually put on the macro. Triple clicks, I get all the numbers. Okay, so box 1 puts me down there, and then box 2 is going to be the presentation, and yeah, definitely got to do this in advance. And it looks like box 2 goes on. Oh, there's a. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to crop myself a little more. This is very fiddly. Okay, so now you get most of the presentation, and still have a chunk of me in the screen. So, so I could definitely see using this for a presenter. Also for hybrid, you might have. It's kind of interesting, different ways of setting up hybrid. How many different sources of people you have coming in to the feed. If you get multiple remote people, is there presentations, or maybe multiple cameras on people in the room?
You could fade between those things. Like you're doing a presentation and people will see you for a while, but then they also want to see the full slide.
Well, certainly what you could definitely do is, okay, I'm gonna put the presentation there, but let's say, and then I'm on 1. So if the person they start taking questions from the audience, they're not really paying attention to the slide anymore, and you might jump to them full screen while they're doing that, and then they go to the next slide, they're back on the presentation, you cut back to that. But there's all kinds of different ways. Okay.
The presenter could just be another laptop with like an HDMI app.
Right. The presentation would probably not be in your media player. Well, for starters, the presentation is likely to be run by the person presenting. So it's their laptop up front. You might need the HDMI extender. There's all sorts of options there, HDBaseT, or the convert to SDI, or however you want to do it to get it into the switcher. And, something you have to worry about is that the switcher does not support HDCP because it can record. So you need something to deal with that, or they need to present something that isn't going to care about copy protection.
Peter, there are an awful lot of little 1x2 splitters that strip out HDCP, like the ORE iBrand ones do, so you can get away with that.
Right. So that's one answer. The other thing to worry about is when the laptop negotiates the what resolution to send, and is it more than your extender can handle. So we added this thing to the stream kits of a scaler, so that it'll let the laptop send lots of resolution, and then the scaler will just pull out like 1080p 30, which is perfectly reasonable for a presentation, and just send that down the line. Okay, so okay, some more things I want to talk about in the super source. Okay, so the super source does let you put a background on it. Nice color. No, what is that showing? Why is the color one just color?
Because your slide has the black color.
Oh, right. The slide's got the black chunks. Thank you. That explains it. I suppose I'll have a slide that is more appropriate for like that. Actually. Okay. Never mind. Okay, so that's what's going on. But let's pick that for the color. Anyway, so in fact, this since the slide was that funny image, it wasn't the full screen. We'd actually need the boxes set up differently. But again, it doesn't. It can be a graphic. In the background, if you had, you want, pretend you're doing Hollywood Squares, you can get a still from Hollywood Squares or something like that. So all kinds of possibilities. Can I actually put a wide image back there? I can.
Yeah. You could design a preso that was intended to wrap around the stuff.
Yeah.
Get into this and then sort of account for this problem.
Yeah, that might make sense to do. Okay, anyway, let's go back to black for the background. So the super source can actually put 5 different things on the screen. The 4 boxes plus the background. I'm only currently showing 2 boxes, but let's see. So I'll go to the 4-box preset, and we'll just put bars into the other boxes so you can just see what it looks like. And then if you need even more than 4 boxes, each of the upstream keyers can also put more boxes on screen. So let's see, do I have a preset? Yeah, I don't have a preset to do that. Okay, so I'm gonna, okay. So just imagine that these 4 boxes aren't actually taking up the whole screen, but are all scrunched off to the left, so that I could then do this guy. If I put him here, yeah, that totally covers it up. Okay, I'm gonna make him smaller. But I just put up the upstream key. Right, so now that's a 5th box. So you can actually get 8 boxes on the screen with 4 from the super source and 4 from the upstream keyers, and that's all your inputs. So you can get every input onto the screen at once. Not clear if that's really practical, but it's possible.
Fun dynamics with it.
Right. Let's see. The other thing's interesting. Well, as you can sort of tell, the upstream keyer is downstream of the super source. So the first layer is the 4 boxes from the upstream keyer, or however many boxes you have, and then all the other ones go on top of that. Anyway, so
in the stack, where does super source sit?
so it's the first layer. It's the bottom layer.
Where's the sit in relation? Oh, okay, so it's not the background anymore. It's something into it. becomes the background.
Right.
Okay.
So whatever the super source is the bottom layer. Whatever you put into it is like the background. As I said earlier, it's like a virtual input. It's the same level as a camera, even though it has all kinds of but as I said, because it has all kinds of stuff in it, that's why I was calling it kind of like a separate mix effects bus that can feed into your main mix effects bus.
Understanding the order of the stack is the thing that's really bringing it clear in my mind at long last.
The switcher directly can't. That is the software on the front panel, the software that comes with it that I'm demonstrating doesn't animate the super source, but the software on the iPad does. And I kind of wish I could show that, but it turns out that the protocol is fast enough to do animations over. And so when you transition on the iPad from a 3-box layout to a 4-box layout, you see the boxes slowly shrink and the 4th box slide in and take its place. It looks really cool. The other thing, it's got a mode for, there's 4 boxes, but the person who's speaking gets a little bit bigger than the others, and you can animate all that.
A common release for both pieces of software.
The other one doesn't come from the same company. It's third-party software. That's my whole point. The ATEM publishes an API spec, and people have written to it.
Okay, I know it's ATEM.
And there's probably more than I don't know about as well. But because I was calling the super source, it was almost like a second bus upstream of the main bus in this, but it doesn't really have transitions, except for just when you're in the super source, right? You can just change what the source is on the fly.
Can macros call other macros in timing?
No, but you can put all kinds of stuff into macros. But mostly, I think what you put into the macros is all these tweaks that I've been trying to do live that take forever. So that animation, you can't really do a wipe, or you definitely can't do a mix, but you can definitely do some animation upstream of the 1ME bus on or the main bus on the super source. The last thing I want to cover is something with audio. So let's just kill all this stuff. Turn off all the keys. Okay, back to normal. So now into audio. So I want to cover this in some detail. So I'm going to start with how I normally run my shows. As I said before, I'm almost always doing it where there is a separate audio console with a separate engineer mixing the audio and coming up with a mono feed for the stream that's intended for the stream, and I bring that in on the mic 1 input. Unfortunately, the mic 1 input is a stereo input, so I've got a splitter thing. It's also unbalanced, so if your mixer is not next to your ATEM Extreme, but maybe you're using a digital mixer, and so the hardware is actually on stage and your ATEM Extreme's at the back of the room, then you need a transformer, direct box, some sort of thing to let you send the balanced signal across the room and switch to the unbalanced the extreme input is. Let's see. Now I don't have a good way to simulate stuff. Okay, so I can't really make the meters light up. Okay, so one thing that's annoying about so these are meters right here, and one thing's annoying about them is that they're post fader, and it's a digital mixer, so avoiding clipping is even more important. And I think what they were thinking is that when you're on a camera, you don't really have any control at this point. Because if there's clipping, it's going to clip at the camera where it's encoding that signal anyway. So they didn't think, oh, we need a pre-fader meter to measure these things. So I usually set the mic at 0 gain, so then my meter is actually telling me what's really coming in. You can tweak this gain here. I like the horrible user interface of the mouse on the knob. And to get the one channel where you want it, and then set the output volume on this fader. And again, I'm imagining that you don't need EQ, because that's going to probably happen on your main board. So the things you might care about are delay and dynamics. So this control here is delay. Why is it not? Let me look at. Oh, I see. It came up on another screen. But that brought up the equalizer, which we don't care about. Let's see. It's great on. I use this all the time. Okay. I'm not sure why that's not working today, because I used that quite recently. So there's something about this rig.
What are you trying to do?
Click this button here, which brings up a dialog about delay. You can set delay on the input to try to get it in sync to the video. Because in fact, there's this strange bug that when you are emulating a webcam and going into a Mac on USB and using Zoom, the video gets delayed. Somewhere, I've seen it as bad as 800 milliseconds. Usually it's closer to 200 milliseconds. And so you need to delay the audio to fall in sync with the video. And what's weird is the problem doesn't happen on PCs. The problem doesn't happen on QuickTime. It's some weird thing. And it turns out it's not just the ATEM. The problem is on any external webcam on the Mac, or at least certain implementations of webcams introduce this video delay. So you have to add an audio delay, and sometimes it's so bad that the amount of audio delay that the ATEM will permit isn't enough, and I've hooked up external delays to add even more.
When I click on that, I get a little knob that says 0 through 8 frames delay.
So it's working for you. I wonder why it's not working for me, but okay. Yep, that's exactly what I was expecting.
How many milliseconds is a frame?
Depends on your frame rate. Let's see. Somewhere, only settings, you can specify our frame rate. Okay, we're running 1080p 60, so that's 60 frames a second. So as you can tell, 8 frames at 60 frames a second is nowhere near this 200 milliseconds that I've seen it be.
That's different on different nights. Right?
I think it's different hardware, or possibly which hole in the Mac you plug into, because it's a hardware thing. This window here.
Peter, there must be another window behind you. There must be another window behind Oh, you,
Um,
because I can see the focus changing. Your top bar there is changing when you click on that delay.
I'll tab or whatever, I'll tab around and see if I can find it.
it's all considered.
Our probably not a handle.
No, it doesn't have a last handle. It looks kind of. Oh, but you're right. The focus. Oh, the focus seems to go to this screen.
Maybe behind your Zoom.
No. Yeah.
That's a copy of that, isn't it?
Nope. Well, this little window is a copy of that whole screen, but the screen isn't. I'm not doing extended display. This little window is a copy of the multi-view. This window is a copy of that, and I don't see any other windows here. So, I often have this problem on the Mac where it creates these windows that are only on screen by 1 pixel. And oh, there it is. I found it. There it is.
That's nuts.
Yeah, if I didn't have all these windows open for the Zoom, it would be less confusing. Okay, now I got to put all my Zoom windows back where they were. Oh, what's that?
So if you
Okay,
had the
so,
opposite
yeah.
problem, could you ever delay the video, or can you only delay the audio?
You can. No, you need an extra piece of hardware to delay the video. But I don't think I've ever seen the audio get delayed. Anyway,
I was doing this, I think I just turn the existing knob a different color or something and make it apply to delay instead while you're in that mode.
yeah, having
I
these
suppose-
window pop up really isn't very
Shotgun
helpful.
mic at the back of the room with the camera in the front.
Oh, you want to adjust for the mic at the back of the room? Yeah, I suppose. Except that's going to sound so horrible anyway. If your mic is so far away that that you're getting that kind of delay, like it's just going to sound like crap in terms of echo and everything. Okay, so the other thing, you got this full dynamics thing, your expander gate, compressor limiter can definitely be handy.
Per channel.
Well, again, yeah, there is a compressor limiter per channel, but I'm envisioning that you're only bringing in 1 channel anyway. And particular, a lot of the gigs that I'm doing, the audio engineer is mostly focusing on the house sound, and he might miss that the audio for video peaked.
Is he doing like a post fader aux for that?
Yeah.
So you basically get the house mix?
Well, I don't know if he's using post fader or pre fader because there definitely could be some situation where he's like doesn't need any drum in the house, but we definitely need it on a Zoom.
You get fighting about this at Metal. People get unsetting it and setting it.
Anyway, I find it really handy that the multi-view lets you have this little meter bridge image. I've got that on the screen right now, so I don't have to like make sure that I go to this window with the audio to see that, right? Because I'm mostly going to be working in this window, but as you can see in the multi-view, the audio's there. There's even a mode where, let's see, where's that guy? Somewhere there's a mode where I can turn on the meter right here. I personally find that kind of in the way, but somebody might like it. There's also the issue So you turn the meter on a camera, and that's the input level at that camera. But there's no place in the multi-view to put the aux in except on the meter bridge. And then I figure, well, once I've got the meter bridge at all, I'm not going to bother with any of these.
Doesn't that have a mic on it? That camera for you?
It does, but I'm not using it. I'm using this thing for my audio interface. And in fact, we don't see the audio from that. Why don't we see the audio? The splitter should send the audio.
The camera should be giving you audio if you're able to.
Yeah, but of course, oh, that's right. That camera is going straight into the switcher,
It's a stereo mic.
and it's going to camera one, so we should see it. So if I do this, hello, oh, I got to enable it. That'd be nice. That's over here. That is that guy. Hello, right? Yep, that's that guy. That should do it. We got the input gain cranked. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we got to disable the menu or something. Anyway, I'm not going to play with that anymore. Okay. There's. I'm not sure I can find it. There was a. There was a audio. Here we go. Split into separate mono channels. Yes. This could be handy. So I'm in the settings, settings under the gear, under audio, and it's a stereo mic, which normally goes into the mix as stereo. But if you're actually trying to, send some sort of stereo thing, now mic one comes in as two different inputs, which I can now pan separately. And then, because before I did, it was a balance. It wasn't a pan. Because this one here, so mic two is normal. It's really a pan, and if I was bringing in separate signal on left and right, and if I had some trouble with my cable, and let's say the signal was only coming in on the right channel, if I do this, I can now send the right channel to both left and right, and it'll be fine. Again, if you're streaming stereo, but for what I do, we're not trying to stream stereo. We're not going to try to do a stereo mix live.
And not all Zooms even understand stereo at this point.
Where'd you find that,
Right,
that setup?
plenty do. Pardon, Eric?
Where was that setup? I missed where you picked that got that
Okay.
setup window.
So
little gear.
in the software control, under the gear, on the lower left, and then under the audio tab, and there's split audio.
Got it.
That's in general. Oh, look, you can set the line level. Plug-in power. I wonder if they need Phantom. But I didn't realize that you actually had to set this to line or mic level here. This is also pretty important input, a pretty important thing to configure that makes sure you're probably bringing line level into those mic inputs. So you have to set it to line here.
Really, that's the default. That's what we had. That's what we sent it. So line level never into the one.
Yeah, that's probably
Yeah,
the
it's a
default.
separate little method on that.
Okay, so I have covered everything that was on my agenda, I think. So, any more questions? Anything else somebody wants me to try to demo? Something want me to go back and do again a little more slowly?
Definitely gonna take some playing around to get the hang of it.
Yeah, playing
Oh,
around
yeah.
where we have cameras and stuff to play with. Peter, how would you do a running clock? Like if let's say we take a bio break and everybody come back in 5 minutes and you want to put a 5-minute clock up there, would you just have one of the laptops put a PowerPoint up that counts down the clock?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly, there's nothing in the ATEM that can generate that for you. So you got to have some software that can generate that, and then put it, bring it in, bring it in as a camera, and then if you want to get fancy, you could key it and just have the text superimposed on top of something else.
I wonder if you could have have an external thing uploading the media player into a media slot every second with a new image. Would that be fast enough?
I don't know how
Using
fast.
the API.
I don't know how fast the uploading the media player goes.
Is the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you, I'm sure you could do it if you're trying to do once a minute. if something was changing at that pace. But again, that you'd have to implement.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas there should be plenty of software that'll just put a clock on the screen.
Yeah, they're all
That
things in the browser.
yeah.
Or if you were at a basketball game or a football game, you're broadcasting that, you could put a camera on the scoreboard in the stadium, and then have that.
Right, and then that's one where you'd want to do this picture-in-picture thing.
Yep.
Stick it in like that, or even smaller, and put the, pretend that image was shooting the camera.
And you
I definitely know that in the past they used to use a camera on the clock. Nowadays they tend to do that in graphics, but I guess it means that at a professional sports stadium they have some connection between the game clock and their graphics generator, which is asking an awful lot for this prosumer level gear.
There's a master game clock that goes out all over the place. Somewhere.
Again, but then they have some sort of protocol. What is the protocol of describing the time and then rendering that? I think a camera pointing at the clock, and then you could definitely play around with the parameters on the DVE to make it take the amount of screen real estate you want, and not be too bad. But this other issue is like trying to tell the cameraman to make sure that nothing too important is in that lower left corner or wherever you put it on the screen.
Same for a graphic, though.
Well, the graphic might be on the screen less time, but you might you might leave look, in a basketball game, you probably would have the game clock on for the whole last minute, which will take 3 or 4 minutes to play, right?
Yeah,
and
but you have the lower third. If you're doing the score in the PowerPoint slide with the graphics person, you'd have that as a lower third throughout the whole game.
Oh, yeah.
It just doesn't have the clock. All it has is the score. So if you had the scoreboard on a camera and you did that in picture, you save a whole person operating graphics. And a lot of times what we do, especially for football, is we don't have a graphics person. The person doing the switching does this graphics too. It's basketball and volleyball where it's tough because the score changes so often.
I suppose PowerPoint is not so ideal for live editing of the content of the slide. Somebody somewhere must have some other tool that does that better.
No, you're right. It's not PowerPoint. I forgot the name of the thing. It's another hard program to use quickly.
The other thing I could definitely imagine doing is write a little custom JavaScript that that does it, or especially if you played around where you weren't putting the whole screen, you have some sort of key set up. That's a neat thing that that this has. Maybe I'll show that off. Is let's see. What do I want to key?
Kinds of keys, you got chroma and luma, right? There are like several
Um,
other types, right?
Yeah, upstream. Upstream chroma luma pattern just means you just specify some shape, and so that's where I was talking about how they used to just take the you take a wipe and you go halfway and you sort of say, oh, I got split screen. Well, with the pattern key you can just draw any shape you want. Preview this thing.
Take it however big it is. So.
However big you want, any of these shapes, whatever, and it's just. I guess I got this.
You're on mix. Put it on white.
No, I was on too soft. Right. So now I've got a pattern key. And
Oh, yeah.
and it looks like a white, but I'm previewing a key, and this comes in now with a with the key. What did I do wrong? I didn't want. Yeah. I think my source is the same. This problem. My source is the same as me here. Pattern, source, 2, and now right. So that's but so that's a pattern key. But you can get that all preset however you want. I haven't even played with these guys. See what the hell it does. Oh, I think this is more interesting than that. Oh, okay. It's on air. Oh, there we go. And then leave. Okay. So those are pretty cool. So that's in the flying pattern key.
That could probably design some cool stingers there.
Yeah.
Even
And then
take an image across the screen or something.
and then DVE is mostly about this inset box. Well, it also does. It looks like DVE also lets you do flying, but unlike the super source, you have more control over this border. Let's see. So I'm going to get out of the Luma. No, I'm in the DVE key now. Okay, and oh no, and it's. Why don't I see it? Just take it out, take it back in. Okay, it's it should be putting the I hit my macro to put it there. Okay, so now we weren't doing borders, so the super source doesn't do fancy borders because you're supposed to just line up your boxes in on top of a background graphic. But the DVE key, you get to do all kinds of stuff with these borders. And and again, I'm not sure. Some sort of border makes sense. That's a pretty ugly one, but
Okay, so the key source is whatever you set up there. It's not depending on some other image with the waffle.
no, right. Yeah,
You're
the
designing the key right here.
yeah. The key source on this is just the the rectangle that you define with this position and size. The size is because because the important thing you're doing is that you're actually shrinking the image, right? This is a full screen image, that's on camera 2 is getting shrunk to go in a rectangle. One thing that's important: the ATEM will not make it larger than 1, right? Because with cropping,
You could like blow up just like one section of your.
yeah, it doesn't let you blow it up and get blocky. And you could on a switcher that could take high res, like if there was some sort of notion of like you had a switcher that let you feed it 4K, but you tell it you want your output to be 1080p, then blowing it up might be reasonable because you might still have your input pixels might still be smaller than your output pixels, and that would be a reasonable thing to do. Or even you've definitely seen effects where they blow it up anyway and just let it be blocky.
Pattern like that, some border controls and all that?
Yeah.
Release, and I think they've mixed around kind of where the plugins are at and things. So I'll show you how to get this back if it's gone. The problem lies in that
I've got
the plugin is in the wrong place. So we need to put the plugin in the right place. First off, get the plugin from where it is currently. It's in your library, in application support, in Blackmagic Design. And then
Okay, it's blurry. Also, I guess it doesn't. I guess I'm not seeing a border on this one. Yeah, the mask. Let's see here. I think so. Well, the mask I wanted to show was on the downstream key. Because it lets you do a pattern. Okay, so I'm going to kill all this upstream key stuff and go back to a downstream key and try it. Okay, so what I want to, I'm going to key off of that big graphic. Okay, downstream keys. Let's see here. We're playing with number 1, so the big graphic is info 1. Oh, cover this guy. Okay, so now we can do a mask, and we can make this smaller. There we go.
Basically a prop.
Right. So you and but part of what you can do is you effectively get a rectangular pattern key here, because I can key off of black, and then I can set this to work off of black, and now my key is this rectangle, and I can locate this rectangle anywhere I want. And then the other tricky thing that you could do, this it's going to take forever to demonstrate it, but if I made a useful rectangle, and then if my source was the super source, I could then use the super source to take some image and squeeze it into that rectangle. And then it means I now have this reduced image showing up on a downstream key instead of an upstream key. Because now it's like taking my special little mini bus that's the super source, skipping the whole upstream stuff and going straight to a downstream key.
There's kind of like internal feedback loops with that stuff.
That doesn't really have any way to let you go back forward. This doesn't do that.
Or is it the camera out?
Sure. Yeah. The other interesting play of like what's upstream and downstream is one of your outputs on this list of possible outputs is called clean feed. Well, for starters, you got SuperSource directly. But so if somehow you're just trying to do something complicated, I don't know, maybe you've got some game show and you need the participants to see some of the material but not other material or something like that. People playing poker and the audience can see the card cameras, but you don't want the people playing to see the card cameras, but you want to let them see themselves when they're talking, or something complicated. And so we're like, who gets to see what? And so now you can sort of play around with so clean feed is everything before the downstream keys. That's just what the definition of it is. So did I put this? Okay, so I'm showing you guys clean feed. So now when I do stuff on the upstream keys, you see it, but when I do stuff on the downstream keys, you don't see it. And if I go back to program, you see the downstream key stuff, right? So this is clean without the downstream keys, and that's programmed with the downstream keys. And then if you get complicated enough with your downstream keys, it can be pretty different from what's coming out of your upstream keys. Also, if you, I can't do it on the front panel, interestingly enough, but I can output the SuperSource straight out. So, the SuperSource could be cameras 1, 2, and 3, and the main program could be, playing around with cameras 4, 5, and 6 or something. And
the upstream keys show up in the clean feed, right?
Right, the upstream keys show up in the clean feed and not the downstream keys.
Point before all the downstream.
Yeah. The transition, the wipe should show up in the clean feed. Clean feed, the wipe shows up there. And all the upstream keys show up in the clean feed, even if they happen to be lower thirds. So if you want a lower third to show up in your clean feed, you have to implement it on the upstream key.
So for the game show, you got to design which is on which half of that carefully.
Right.
Send it.
Let's see. I was showing. Okay. Let's get rid of these keys.
Is that setting? So you got the two outputs. Are we setting either one of those?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm currently not hooked up on output 2, and output 1 is getting sent to the Zoom as my main video. But the front panel gives me most of these options, and the software gives me a few more options. Right? Like I can't put bars out from the front panel, but I can from here.
You had no problem of getting. Let's see, you're running the control software over the net, right? So you have no trouble getting that all back together after we returned your switcher after NEFA. So
right.
IP address and everything.
Right, right. Configuring the IP address. Oddly enough, there's another piece of software that does that. That's done on this.
I tried to download some monster package from ATEM and said it was the only way to do it was like register the switch and go and all the crazy.
I don't know. There's this other piece of software that does a few more setup parameters, and it's one of the things that's definitely a pain is remembering where a bunch of parameters are, because I mentioned there's a bunch of stuff that was here under the curve. There is stuff that is under not system preferences, but preferences here. There's stuff that's here under the, well, I guess these are more, well, no, the macros you could argue are preferences. The outputs are kind of things you derive. Load the streaming settings. And then lastly, there's this completely different piece of software that sets even a few more things.
Why is that not in the main body of the control software?
Yeah, good question.
Why are people not just ditching right and left at ATEM or like magic?
So for instance, earlier today I was trying to turn the button brightness down because I normally run it like this, and this didn't look as good on the camera. So I turned the button brightness down. It's like, I just had to Google, where's the button brightness?
So I see a save button right there. You can save those preferences, but I haven't seen too many things today where you've had to save what you're doing. It just saves it. I don't know if it holds through power outage, but if we have a convention where you've got 3 different events and 3 different switch operators or something, is there a way to clean the board, or does the switch operator A have to kind of get things undone and ready for switch operator B?
There definitely is. Let's see. So, you can save the startup state, you can save it as a file, and you can restore it. So when you hit save startup state, that basically says, take the current setting and make it what you see when you power up. So so basically what I would recommend for a show like that is define your clean state, save it as a startup state, probably save it as a file as well. Then all you have to do is power cycle it, and you'll get back to that clean state.
And that file is probably an XML that you can like edit, right?
Yeah. The stuff is pretty easy to. It's pretty easy to understand. The problem is it's full of all these variables, and there isn't documentation on the list of all the variables. So what you have to do is try something, see what gets written to the file, then you learn the name of the variable.
Yep. Yeah, another friend of mine was going through hell trying to set up a bunch of macros. So she was hand editing the macros in a file to like duplicate them and tweak them slightly. And then she did eventually get through that, but she had to sort of reverse engineer the storage format.
Yeah, let me put some macros on the screen. Let's see, I gotta put those. Here it is. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna stop. We're gonna stop.
This is gonna take this long, right?
Well, no. Except, the original plan was 90 minutes, and now we're into the rat hole stuff. Mm-hmm. Anyway, okay. So this is what macros look like.
Yep.
But I haven't found any documentation of exactly all the syntax for all these different things. So the other thing that's kind of a pain about them is that when you record a macro, it records, you can't record state. This stuff here is the state of the whole switcher. But if you're like, oh, record my state of time, doesn't have that. So what you have to do is tell it to start recording a macro. You have to tweak everything you want, which might mean, so if you start by setting it exactly right, then you go to the macro and then you bring it down and bring it back where it was. And you have to do that for every item that you care about. Record the action. And then go into the macro. So the macros are definitely slow and fussy. That software doesn't seem to make that any nicer.
But at least they put it in a nice format that you could conceivably edit. Like, they don't try to make it like one giant line like a JSON block or something.
Right.
So they give you that leeway. You don't have to like put the file up yourself and clean it up before you can even look at it.
And so then one of the things I did is in this macro file, I'm now collecting in this one macro every single variable I've ever seen on any of my macros. It's like, I don't need to turn on the shadow in any of my macros that I care about, but now I have this written down. I'll start collecting a larger and larger
I wonder if
set.
other people would put collections like that up on their websites to help the community.
Yeah, could be.
I used to do that with lighting macros and stuff too.
Okay, should we call it a wrap?
Thank you very much.
Silence means assent.
I think so.
Yeah,
Eric, we'll
great,
talk about the
Peter,
recording.
thanks. The only thing we could do now is to try and use it before we forget some of this stuff.
Right.